Thanks, Weave, for hosting. Johnny, really appreciate it. There you are. Thanks to Jeremy and Brandon for inviting me to come do this, and whoever those random people were that for some reason thought I'd be useful here. Thank you. I don't take this lightly, like this group of really talented people. Product, this is the beating heart of Silicon Slopes right here. And I really hope that this is valuable for you. It's certainly been valuable for me to be collecting these thoughts. What we'll be talking about today is a lot of things that have been bouncing around in my head for a long time, over the last 10, 15 years that I've been doing strategy in some sort of fashion or another. And when we'll be talking about product myopia is the framing of it. We'll get into that, so thinking beyond the trees. First, just by way of introduction, lest you confuse me for a college student, which happened 2 weeks ago. I'm told I have a baby face. I don't know if that's true. But, first and foremost, I'm a husband. I've been married for 16 years, celebrated that a month ago. We've got 4 kids starting 11 years ago. Fortunately, we still have them, which is amazing. The next, longer than that, I've been an artist. I was actually a freelance artist for some period of time during college and for a period after. Fortunately, I'm not trying to feed all 6 of those hungry mouths on that lack of a salary. But you know, it is a fun pastime, something I'm passionate about. And also, I've been a teacher in a variety of different ways. I don't want to claim that I was certified to teach in a true public setting, but certainly in a variety of different scenarios. I've taught an LSAT course for a while. I've taught a number of different things. And I raised that one in particular because that is really important to how I've navigated my career and what I do today. Really passionate about how that plays into what we do at Pluralsight. So where am I now? I'm at Pluralsight. I've been there for about 2 years. I lead up the experience, strategy, and operations team. And just for a little bit of context, the way that I frame these is intentional. It's how we talk as a team. It's also thinking about the outcomes, and some of that will play into what we talk about here. First and foremost, we're focused on engagement and retention. We care about our learners on the tech platform there, getting value out of their experience. And our job is actually to go find where they're not primarily, find where there are dead ends, find out where there are places where they're running into difficulty, and help the product organization see that and find ways to solve for it. Second, we have value creation and value capture. And that's an important way that we frame it. Tactically it's packaging and pricing. We figure out what are the packages, SKUs, tiers, whatever, that we're taking to market, and how do we price those. The thing that I want to convey there, I've had a lot of different conversations over the course of my career with folks in product, UX, engineering, and in other disciplines as well, who really feel icky when we start to talk about the dollars and cents, right? I don't know if that's true for any of you, but I found it valuable as I think about it and as I convey it to others that, at the most simplistic level, obvious level, yes, we're a for-profit company, we've got to make money, or else we're not going to be able to do all the things that we do. But I think about it even more deeply than that, insofar as when I think about the value that we're creating, the packaging effort of what we take to market. Are we going to have 1 SKU, 5 SKUs? How do we craft those? It's all about making sure that we have the right value provided to those customers in a way that they're actually going to use it. It's one way that you also guard against feature bloat, right? And you price it in a way where it's sustainable, where somebody's going to want to come back. Because what we really care about is people actually getting value out of this, and us being able to do that over the long run. Value chain, that's another place that we play, and it's really around getting the data to understand, do we have the engine to make this all possible? Both from an engineering perspective as well as from a content perspective, which is where we really have spent a lot of time. And it's around thinking about what are the assets that make it possible to do all the things that you want to do for your users, your customers, right? And research and operations, thinking about the planning and prioritization approaches, how do we pull that into make sure that we're evaluating the right things. I focus here primarily because we're actually going to talk about some of these things as we go through. Now, before I jump in on that, one of the lenses I want you to be thinking about as we go through this today is blind spots. Part of the job of my team in all of these different areas is to help our experience organization, our product content and engineering organization, understand the blind spots that they're running into. I framed it as product myopia, right? It's all about understanding what you don't see. That's my job. I recognize that in the world that we all live in, all of our different roles, we run into scenarios where we're on a treadmill.
Wow, you're doing a good job.
And we're cruising ahead, and there are things distracting us. Might be a dad who, as you notice there, by the way, not me. You notice the dad is like, oh, hey, look at me. I've got something important. I'm going to distract you from what you're doing right now. And then the kid falls, and the dad takes like 5 seconds before he's like, oh, I should probably go help out my 3-year-old who's now getting pummeled by that. But I mean, we run into that all the time, right? I run into that in my own job. It's like, hey, here's all the things I've got to do. And it gets in the way of the things that I need to be seeing and thinking about and recognizing so that I can do what I'm doing today far better tomorrow. And in fact, even do different things tomorrow, reframe the problem. All right, this one's giving me trouble trying to get to the next slide. Come on.
Look at me.
Look at me. All right. We're just going to bounce out of here. We'll be right back, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. And here we go. Think about it as you're driving down the road. You've got blind spots. You need to be looking left lane, right lane. You need to be able to see in your rearview mirrors. You need to be able to crane your neck and see around you so that you're not moving into somebody else's lane, which also nearly happened to me on the way down here. Not me doing it, somebody else, I promise. I think about this lens as well from a trees and forest perspective. This is not, of course, a new metaphor, but I think maybe a different take on it. So we've all got the. By the way, how many product managers here or in that discipline? Okay, how many UX design? And shout out if you're something other than that. Researcher. Analyst. Product marketing. All right, beautiful. So we got a range of different disciplines here. I think probably true for all of us. We have some domain in which we play. Now, maybe we're part of a larger product marketing analyst or researcher, or I missed one. UX design. Like we're part of a broader team, and so we've got responsibility for a particular feature, experience, audience, whatever it may be. Right? And somebody else has responsibility for some other part of who we serve. And that's our tree. That's the tree that we're focused on. It's a little sapling, and we're kind of tilling the earth around, and we're trying to help grow. Who we care about growing that. Now, the thing that's interesting, though, is if you've ever dealt with quaking aspen in your yard, there we go. I've got them in my own. You will mow those down every single year 1,000 times. And the reason is because they're all connected. Who knows what this is? Back here.
It's like the largest living organism on Earth. It's all one tree.
And where is it?
I think is it not with us? I don't know.
Fish Lake, Utah. Fish Lake Forest in Utah. Yeah, this is the largest living organism on the earth. And it's in our backyard. It's called Pando. And it's because every single tree is connected at the roots. They're all one tree. So think about it in terms of your particular feature, your particular audience from a product marketing perspective that you're focused on, your particular area, your patch of land, right? How does that connect to you? It's because it's not just a discrete patch of land. It's not a discrete tree. It's all one living, breathing organism, right? You think about it as, my feature connects with that feature. The users that we're serving are typically going to be the same folks touching different experiences throughout the platform. And that's true if you're e-commerce and you're focused on search, somebody else has browse, somebody else has checkout. It's also true if you're, a video, I'm losing it, the, teleconferencing and all the rest of what we do with Weave, right? I totally botched that, I'm sorry.
For patient communication.
Patient communications, far better. You've had practice. It's true if you're a tech learning platform like Pluralsight. It's true for so many different things that we might be doing, right? And recognizing that broader context we live in, that we operate in, that we live and breathe in, is critical. And I'm going to talk to you about 3 different levels of that. The first level is, okay, I've got my feature, what's within the rest of the product, or platform, or whatever your context is, right? Understanding how all those different flows work together. The second one is understanding within your company. How does the product generally fit within your company? We'll talk about some of the ways that Pluralsight that's laid out to be important to recognize how we connect with the other departments. And then also thinking about how it fits into your user's overall experience. Not just in the lens of, hey, I've got a particular new development that I'm working on, and so I'm going to do some research, I'm going to talk to them, I'm going to do a survey, I'm going to do whatever your tools are that you're using there. But also thinking about, okay, when I'm asking these questions, how am I biasing the conversation? What am I not saying, right? All right, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what is strategy? What does that actually mean? This is by no means the textbook definition. There is not one. There's 1,000. Having been in the strategy world for a long time now, it sometimes grates on me how different people use it and more particularly abuse it. But I think a lot of these definitions are helpful. To me, it's all about plans, decisions, and assets, PDA. Not the typical PDA. It's all about those things, and yet it's not just those things. You can have plans for things you do, decisions you make, assets that you have that have nothing to do with any strategy, right? I have, a choice of what I eat for breakfast. That's a decision, and not at all strategic in my case, almost all the time. Probably true for most of you, but in the case of, hey, I'm running a marathon today, that may be strategic. You're thinking about how that's going to impact other things down the road, right? The things that are critical to understand in terms of how you think about strategy is first, you need to have some sort of direction, some sort of priority of what you're targeting, right? You need to have options and trade-offs. So you don't have a choice. It's literally that's all you've been given, and you don't have a way to kind of work outside of that. Sorry, not strategy, right? If you don't have trade-offs with those options, if the options are fairly identical, right? Not really strategy, if you can't actually tease out those trade-offs. If you are in a very static environment where it's deterministic, you can make a decision and you actually know all the sequence of events that's going to happen after that. It's a great plan, perhaps, a great decision, perhaps, not the realm of strategy. You don't need the tools of strategy to solve that situation. And it's all about risk and probabilities. If it's deterministic, if you know what's going to happen, you don't really need a strategy, you just need a plan. You just need to know what you want and go get it. And the reason I frame that up is because strategy is inherent to what we should be doing all the time. I certainly don't view strategy as my patch of land at Pluralsight. My goal is to make it so that, well, eventually you don't even need me. Like my goal is so that everybody there is thinking in these ways and using these tools and has access to them. And so they can get the job done without needing all of us all the time. Don't worry, those from my team here, that's not imminent. We're going to be around for lunch. There's a quote here. This guy, so one of the random things I've done, 3-year vacation, went to law school. Why, we can get into that later. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. was one of the greatest Supreme Court judges ever. And in a letter to a colleague, a friend, he wrote, the only simplicity for which I would give a straw is that which is on the other side of the complex, not that which can never, or has not divined it. Close. And it's really, as we think about strategy, and the same thing's true for all the different types of strategy, product strategy, new product development, all this, as well as product management, UX design. Like I see this playing into all of our different disciplines. It's really, a lot of times we'll run into a problem that seems simple on its face. Who's ever done, I've done all my discovery, I've talked to 30 different users. They all said this was amazing, and we launched the feature in thought. Nobody used it. They all like it, but nobody used it. That ever happened? You ever used software or a product where you're like, why did they create this? Right? And it's not necessarily a knock on the research they did. It's just that there's some pieces, there's blind spots, right? What are we missing? I can talk about 4 different steps along the way and where we need to be looking for these blind spots. First, survey the landscape. Understand, we talked about the forest, right? And understand the ecosystem that you live in, the organism that you're part of, the 3 different levels there. Who's familiar with VHS? Who actually owns a VHS today? Okay, there's an age bias there. I'd also suggest, at least in my case, there's a pack rat bias there. Who has actually used the VHS in the last year? Wow. You've got some good stuff on Old Film. I won't spend a lot of time here. If you haven't heard this example before, it's been well used, but I think really instructive. VHS came out alongside Betamax. Sony was running Betamax. Technically, from an audio and video resolution perspective, Betamax was superior to VHS. Who knows why none of you probably, does anybody own VHS? Or sorry, Betamax? You do, that's incredible. Why do you have one?
My dad had it and kept it in good shape and running, and when they moved, he gave it to me. Still have a camcorder too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got one. Why do the rest of you not have, or probably have never even seen, an actual physical Betamax? Does anybody know?
Content choices.
Content choices? Yeah, it's part of it. What's the root cause there?
Licensability.
How long does a Betamax film allow? What's the capacity there? I'll give you a hint. It's just less than a Hollywood film. Yeah. It's strategic flaw. Everybody they went and showed the video to loved it, right? Oh, the audio sounds better. They did all their A/B testing. They did all that, right? It was technically better, but they hadn't recognized the full ecosystem of all the different players they have to think about, all the different use cases. All right, this one. Precursor to the Kindle, Sony e-reader. Picking on Sony a little bit today. Hopefully nobody in the audience is from. Nothing personally. Superior product to the Kindle from a product perspective. What was the failure here? What was the gap? Yeah.
Didn't effectively have like an ebook database to download from, whereas you'll have a lot more resources to download.
That's exactly it. They produced the product effectively, and they failed to get the publishers on board. They failed to understand what the publishers needed, whereas Amazon, typical Amazon fashion, went in and found ways to get all the publishers on board. They actually priced it differently to where they could pay the publisher more. Kind of at a loss to get into the market, and then of course dominate the market. So that's why we ended up with that beauty. A company that I think a lot of us, certainly I, have looked to as an example of a lot of great innovation over the years. If you want to separate innovation from just continual product improvement and development, is Apple. Now there's 2 bookends of this that we don't see here. What came right after 2009? What did they introduce? New product. iPhone they had. They did another version of it. iPad. Came out with that. A pretty good success. Apple's had some bigger ones. but not going to blame them for pretty good success there. What was this though? That's the new. Back in '93, this thing was launched. We actually had one. It was useless. It was, I'm not entirely, but it was, you had to do all the scribbles to recognize your handwriting. It never did that. It never actually understood what you were trying to write. It was a pain to use. It was ahead of its time, right? But it's, it's part of the deal. Sometimes we're gonna miss one, right? It's not because it wasn't good at some of the things that it did. It just wasn't quite the right time. Who's still got the MySpace page? We've got them right here, everybody. Friendster as well, right? Thinking about, what are some of the things that they're running into, each of these companies running into. Like there's a lot of risk out there. Like, keep in mind that, very few companies, very few products really are fully successful. It's actually a lot of work goes into it, which is what all of you are doing. And so as we think about the blind spots, it's thinking about what is the landscape, what are the things that we're going to run into, and getting ahead of that. And always, I think back on these two in particular, what was to stop them from creating Facebook or Instagram or any of these others that are, Facebook is now full to some of us, but nothing. Why didn't they create? Why didn't they evolve to that? Right? It's all about these blind spots. It's all about pulling up and seeing what's going on, getting off of that treadmill. Right? All right. Now evaluate timing. So it's really important that we recognize within the zone that we're playing what our timing is. We may be at the stage of trying to figure out product market fit. If that's the case, we should probably not be worrying about optimization. Not going to help you. If you're in the space of optimization now, like you've got product market fit, you should probably be doing this if you've got a massive leaky bucket of users that are churning out of your platform before you worry about adding more and more features. And of course, you should probably worry about that before you start focusing on adjacencies. And general rule of thumb, you should always be focused on nearer adjacencies, things that you are closer to, just to de-risk the opportunities there, right? One of the things that we use, this is not from our side, didn't want to air all of our dirty laundry, but is understanding the user pathways through the platform, right? As you think back to this living, breathing organism and how you're connected to all of the different features and experiences on the platform, it's understanding how people are navigating through the platform. It's important to understand, how often do they hit this experience, right? And it's important to understand where they go before and where they go after it. You want to understand what's really occurring for them. Why are they coming to the platform? Why does it matter to them? All right, third, define the outcome. One of the things we talk about at Pluralsight a lot is inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So, as we think about a product feature, what would be an input? Just shout it out. I'll give you one. The engineering time that goes into it is an input. It's an asset that you use to go create that thing. What else is an input? Money. Design.
Usability research.
Usability research.
Adoption.
So adoption we'll get to in a second. So that's actually on the other side of this. The inputs are all the things that you use to actually create that. All the research you do, all the people that are involved, all the time and effort, the designs, the mock-ups, and everything, all the lines of code. The outputs are the things that you ship, right? And one of the things that can be challenging is, as we're on the treadmill, the inertia is focused on the celebration of the shipping of things, right? I'm not telling anybody here anything new, but it's something that we continue to have a blind spot on because it's that inertia, right? The important thing is to recognize the outcome. Now, how many of you could say that for every major new build that you've done, you've got a really clear understanding of what is the outcome, what are the metrics that you're trying to drive toward. Is that every single time we've got that nailed? No, right? That's part of what my team's responsible for helping out with. We don't have it all figured out at Pluralsight. We're spending a lot of time figuring it out, but that's a continual effort to make sure that as we're going to go spend, depending on the context, $100,000, $1 million, $5 million, whatever it is, of people time into something. I mean, recognize how much money is going into all of your team's salaries for the things you're building each year. Probably a lot of money, right? That's a lot of responsibility, and going into that without having the outcomes in mind of what we're trying to accomplish, the benefits for the users and the customers, as well as the benefits for your company, that's a big responsibility and a big piece of what is going to help you solve for this myopia. If there's one thing to take away, it's that. It's start out, if you feel like it's a dirty term to call it a business case, whatever, like start out with a plan of what you're trying to accomplish with this before you go and spend all the effort to do it, right? And the last one is get it done. Overly simplistic in the way that it's framed here, but it's really, in our various worlds, typically, in order to have the success of those outcomes, we're trying to drive adoption as one of the outcomes. If we're trying to drive sales, if we're trying to drive retention, if we're trying to drive higher engagement for a particular segment of our user population, it's typically not enough for just our team to do it. Sometimes you can make that happen. But a lot of times you got to figure out, how do I leverage product marketing? How do I leverage sales? How do I leverage our campaigns in the broader marketing setting? How do I leverage customer success? We've had a few experiences on our platform where we realized that they weren't getting the traction that we wanted to. And we're talking about, what's going wrong? What's not working here? And it came down to, well, we're actually not driving the adoption through our sales and customer success motion, right? Was a big piece of it. So we've got to figure out as we go, iterate on this, how do we bring them into the fold to get the full power of Pluralsight behind these particular experiences. Then if they don't work, then we know that, well, maybe there's something wrong with the experiences. But we don't know that until we've actually leveraged all the right levers to push that forward. All right, let's see if this one works. Because if you're not thinking about all those things that go into it, you may end up with a really clear view of what you're going to do. It doesn't quite work. All right, we're going to have to bounce one more time. All right, so let's bring it all home. Surveying the landscape, evaluate timing, define the outcomes, get it done. It's all, again, like each one of these is all about understanding the context of the world that we operate in. It's all about recognizing what are all of the assets that I need to pull together in my plans and decisions in order to have success in this strategy, right? Again, the most important one is defining those outcomes. Being clear on what you're trying to accomplish, because if you're focused on just shipping the thing, because you've had 10 customer interviews, 20, 50 customer interviews that tell you, oh, people like this, then you're not going to succeed every time. Or better yet, you're going to reduce your probability of success, right? You may have some lucky ones, you're going to have fewer lucky ones than if you actually understand what you're trying to get out of it, right? What is the usage you expect to happen on this particular feature? Who should it be mattering to? And one of the things that's, that I didn't touch on worth noting is, am I talking to all of the right people? If I've been talking to 20 people that are all very similar, and I'll say, yes, this is amazing, but I've neglected to talk to the other 5 segments that are of our population. Maybe it's okay that I'm just serving that one, but I need to understand who else is missing. Every time you're doing those customer interviews, those user interviews, ask yourself, who wasn't in this conversation? Both current users, current customers, as well as prospective. Is this going to work for people who are not yet on the platform? can leave you, well, last reminder on the broader context there, and something that's very true to my heart, and I appreciate you guys coming here to, hopefully get something out of it. If nothing else, at least a reminder, some of the things that you do know. And thank you.
So thanks, Brad. We have time for a few questions. Anyone? Just a quick one. Just curious, why did you go to law school?
Thought it would be fun? No. For me, it honestly, I thought it would solve for the things that motivated me in my career at that time. And in fact, it's a beautiful, I didn't realize this before, this is a beautiful example of my myopia. I talked to a bunch of lawyers and asked them what they were driven by, what they liked about their jobs and their careers. And they listed off the three things that matter to me: working with people, problem solving, and variety. Well, it turns out that's not actually what most corporate lawyers are doing. It's just that those are the very small parts of their jobs that they enjoy. Learned a few things there. So this is personal.
You mentioned the importance of outcomes.
Yeah.
And what are some ways that you've been able to measure outcomes? I mean, for example, ship a new feature, you kind of want to understand impact on usability. That's not so hard because you can kind of do click paths and kind of analysis on that thing. But how do you measure impact on revenue? That's one of the things you care about, right? But this feature, okay, maybe it's useful for using it.
Yep.
Is it really impacting revenue? That's measure, so how?
Yeah. That's a great one. And one of the things that'll be important to answering that is coming back to the point around risk and probabilities. It's rarely going to be a definitive, I'm going to make this much money off this, right? I'll also point out, as we've got in our experience strategy and operations team, both engagement and retention as well as value creation, value capture. Sometimes what you're building will not need to focus on new revenues, right? It doesn't need to focus on the selling of something, right? It's important to recognize that that's not always the metric you should be worrying about. But when it is, the way that we've approached it before, it really depends on how you're going to package it and how it fits within the market, right? So if I've got a new feature and I'm going to use that new feature to upsell to a new SKU or an additional spoke on top of what I've got right now, then it becomes clearer. And what you would, the mechanics of it is you'd say, okay, what percentage of my my customers are likely to buy this thing? Which hopefully some of your research can influence. That's going to be a judgment, right? And I'd encourage you to be conservative in that estimate. And what am I going to be able to price it at? And importantly, what are people going to discount it to if you're in a B2B motion, right? You combine those three, and I'm happy to go deeper on the actual mechanic, but you combine those three and you get that. If you're in a zone where, hey, this is actually going to help us to stop the discounting bleeding that's going on. It's a similar motion, of course, it's just a different calculus, right? It's different, it's not, I'm going to charge this much more, but I think it will soften that. And that's actually more judgment-based, right? And then, of course, it is retention. We've done some work with our data science folks to figure out the impact of engagement on different features in the platform, on user retention, keeping them engaged over a longer period of time, and the impact of that on the account retention. Now, it's probabilities. It's all going to be, we got some correlation, causation. You always like to think about that, but at least we've got some idea of how it works. So, hopefully, is that? Yeah.
So let's talk Fenster in MySpace.
Yeah.
You've got product market fit, you've got timing, you've also got the desire to be first to market.
Yep.
I mean, do MySpace was huge, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you do anything different if you're them in those regards? When does timing, I guess, keep you from launching something novel and
Yeah.
incredible? And when do you say, oh wait, the market's not ready?
So I'll give you one book that many of you have probably heard about, Innovator's Dilemma. It's going to be helpful to thinking about that, right? When are you the behemoth within your market and somebody's going to come and disrupt you, right? Really fantastic book and helpful frame that I'm always thinking about. One of the things that I think is important there, I talked about get it done, that one of the most important pieces of driving success in the things you're building is never thinking with the "it's not my job" mentality. I think in product management we don't run into that too often, right? At least not explicitly. But it's always thinking about what are all the different assets that we've got here and that we can leverage to go upon that. Now, I mentioned that in connection with the fact that one of the biggest challenges I run into, and just from a discipline perspective, is helping people see when we've got our heads down. And helping people see when somebody else is likely to disrupt us out there, right? Because MySpace did; they were dominant. They crushed it for a while, and then Facebook came up and started to eat the lunch. And it's recognizing that early enough, and being willing to make the bet to say, yeah, we gotta focus on this. And it's really, if you can have a really good sense of what your primary KPIs are, what are the things that actually drive your business, constantly be reevaluating that and understanding it. We're launching some new features this year that are actually going to change how we measure user engagement, for example, right? Recognizing that. And then looking at, hey, we're starting to see our new user adoption, slow and grow with your MySpace background. Oh, interesting, we've been hearing about this Facebook thing for a while. Well, what's going on? It's like that should be the eye-opening moment to say, well, let's go talk to some users and understand. I mean, it really goes back to that user engagement, like talk to them, understand what they're doing, but it's taking the mindset of what are the biases I've had all this time. If I'm in that zone and I'm talking to my existing MySpace users about what they want in the platform or different ideas of what I think to go build in the platform, well, I'm never going to get the answer, well, hey, that person over there isn't becoming a user today, right? Hopefully,
Hi. What aspects of strategic planning are missed the most when people are doing strategic planning?
when you talk about strategic planning, and you have that's a term of art in some places. So do you have a view of what you're talking about?
It is for a product. So I have
Okay.
customers who are
Perfect.
usually doing their strategic planning and
Yeah.
that's go really bad.
So we're talking about, so great question. If we're talking about the prioritization effort of what are the things that we go build, right? A lot of it is outcomes. I'd start with the thing to keep it, to make sure that you have is a clear sense of what are the KPIs that you're driving toward, the outcomes and the metrics that attach to them. And by the way, one of the biggest things that people run into all the time is measuring what's easy to measure rather than what's important to measure, right? And so if you have a sense of what your outcomes are, what you're really targeting, then the rest of it should flow fairly intuitively, right? Because you start to see, okay, let me take that, let me map up. If I look retrospectively, where have we spent our effort over the last quarter, year, whatever? How does it align to the things that we really care about? How are those metrics improving, declining, whatever? Are we spending our efforts in the right places generally? And then you start to think about, well, what are the things that we can do to go improve that we're not doing today? Where can we funnel more?
Cool. Thanks.
So let's say you're working with a group who it's not their job to be strategy minded, and you're trying to lead them through a strategy session. Do you have any tricks for bringing them like out of the weeds, like
Not talking about anything particular.
No.
No, I mean, like, that's the trick, right? The thing is, like, I want to be really thoughtful in how I articulate this, because being involved in all of the data, you see things. And it's natural to take an arrogant moment and head scratch. Why isn't somebody solving that? Right? That goes over like a ton of bricks, right? And so that's the biggest part of the nuance is how do you actually help people see that in a way that they accept and they want, right? And I've got a bunch of different thoughts. I don't have a clear silver bullet, but I think the key that I would highlight there is helping, like, getting on their side of the contextual wall and understanding what matters to them, understanding what context they have, understanding what, how they see the world, right? So if you're working with folks, other product managers, you're working with your engineers, your designers, you're working with other folks you're interacting with, what is it that they're trying to solve for, what historically they try to solve for, what direction do they think they've been given, right? That's a big one. They think, oh, company vision is this because I heard this thing said by that executive. Like, yes, now I need to understand all that before I can try to help you see something that we're having trouble communicating.
Awesome. One more question.
You mentioned Innovator's Dilemma. Any other favorites that you would recommend?
Yeah. See if I can gather some thoughts. So, winning decisions is a very interesting one to help you understand bias. Nudge is a really fascinating one to think about how very small changes have big, massive impacts, also related to bias. Let's see. There's a handful of, I mean, there's certainly in the lean space, think about some of those. I think 0 to 1, is a fascinating book. And I think I probably have other thoughts in particular that may have. Sure.